Hey,
We
I
made
made
this.
this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the podcast about Red Dwarf here on the We Made This podcast network. My name's Mark Adams and I am your host for this episode. And with me at this time is Carl Bryan. Hello, Carl.
Hello there, Mark.
And also Colin Jackson Brown. Hello, Colin.
Hello.
We're doing another Smegazine. We're doing that 7 episodes in 7 days gimmick that we definitely didn't find stressful the last time we did it.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're nearly on hump day. It's episode 3, which means we're covering Smegazine issue 10. So, yeah. How are we feeling? We're ready to go?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think this is the sort of where it really begins to hit its stride in the Smegazines. I might have said this before, but I think this really is where it finds itself quite a bit in these next couple of issues.
Yeah, it does feel like they've slightly changed the format and settled into what they want to do. They've got rid of the episode adaptations and they're all original comic books now. So there's a confidence there, I think.
It's a lot more text heavy in these ones I've found as well, which is I think it's a good thing, because with the fan base you're dealing with, they're going to want detail. And I think we definitely get that in this, especially in this issue and the ones upcoming.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more staff as well, which shows how successful it was getting at that point.
Yeah, which is nice to read, really, but it doesn't last as long as perhaps we'd have liked in the end. But it does seem like it's at its most popular period right now.
Yeah, which is ironic because, as we'll get into at some point later on, this was the last issue I ever had.
Oh.
So I had the first 10, but you'll have to find out tomorrow why that was.
Right, okay, well, we'll find out tomorrow. Let's get into it. Smegazine issue 10. The cover has Jake Bullet art, kind of noir-style poster with, like, the other characters in the back. And it's advertising a Jake Bullet comic and 20 Red Dwarf books to be won.
And it's an adaptation of the classic Casablanca movie poster.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's right.
And it's really good artwork. I love it.
It's gorgeous. I do feel like the covers are either fantastic with the artwork or how they've come up with the concept, or they're a dull fucking photo.
Yeah.
And this one is exceptionally good.
This would work really well as a poster.
Yeah, I think with this one that they realise that when we get to the comic strip, they're on to something good.
Yeah.
So rather than it being like, oh, we're going to have, because in this issue we've got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's, it could have been any part of this issue could have made the front cover, but with the comic strip, it just shows the quality that's gone up. They're like, right, we're putting the comic strip on the front cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. They did it before with the Geep, didn't they? But I can't think of another time they did it.
No, I'm not sure if they have. I think they definitely did going forward, looking at some of the other covers. Like we were saying, there's so many things in there. It's absolutely packed that they've gone for, on the contents page, again, they've just mentioned 3 of them. Because they wouldn't have room to type up a bit about everything.
Yeah, they haven't got room elsewhere in the issue to do the book competition, so they've done it on the index page.
Yeah.
On the contents.
Yeah, exactly that. The contents page isn't really a contents page. It's just got 2 or 3 of the highlights, which, I mean, I would question what's the fucking point of a contents page that doesn't really do the function of a contents page?
I think it's maybe a tradition thing, isn't it? But then some magazines have a bit of a contents page, but not all of them do.
No, I think with this as well, a lot of contents pages will go, this is on page something, this is on page so-so, this is on page so-and-so. With this, I think because they know their audience, they know that it's going to get read cover to cover.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so they just put a little couple of things in there, and then anything else that's in there is going to be a lovely surprise, basically.
But did they know it was going to get read from cover to cover and then have a Red Dwarf podcast analysing it on every single day for a week, like nearly 30 years in the future?
I'd like to think so.
I think that was in their long-term plan, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, when you put it like that, this is quite ludicrous. What we do.
Everything in podcasting is pretty much fucking ludicrous.
More
It's what we do.
content. More content.
Our content is exemplary. There's definitely no wasted air or dumb shit where we're wasting everybody's time. Wait.
Look, people are listening, so
I know. Thanks. We love you. You're mad, but thank you. We love you.
I've read our reviews. Our reviews are great. Our fans are awesome.
there's no accounting for taste.
Yeah. I did laugh at one of the reviews the other day, which was the funny one swears too much. Like, which one of us is the funny one and which one of us swears too much?
I mean, I swear a lot.
It's me or Mark, isn't it? I think.
Oh, yeah.
And if it's the funny one, it's me.
Oh, yeah.
Rude. The funny one swears too much. I mean, we do mark it as like adults only, so I can say what the fuck I like. Also, thanks for the positive review and saying I'm funny if it was me. If it wasn't me that you thought was funny, bollocks.
That's it. We're just gonna swear more.
I don't need to swear more. I swear enough. Anyway, the questions on this I thought were actually quite kind of pre-internet, quite tough.
They're the kind of thing that if you were a regular reader of the magazine, you probably should know, though.
Yeah, you could research it in previous issues of the magazine, but if this was your first issue, I think those questions were tough.
Yeah, fair. So for the listeners, the questions were... So the competition was to win a copy of either the Red Dwarf Omnibus, which is the first two books collected together, or the official Red Dwarf Companion, which is basically a load of episode guides like we've complained about in most of the previous episodes, so not that one. But yeah, to win the Omnibus, it was Dave Holland's Space Cadet was the forerunner to Red Dwarf, on which radio show, also written by Grant Naylor, did he appear on? Which was, Mark?
Well, it's Son of Cliche.
Yes, the utterly fucking terrible Son of Cliche. And to win a copy of the official Red Dwarf Companion, who directed the first series of Red Dwarf? Carl, who was that?
Ed By.
It was indeed. So you'd both win the books. Well done.
Yay!
If you were picked out of the hat of the people that win.
We do need to review those books at some point.
I had the Companion for so long, and it was a few years ago when I had a big sort of clear out of books. Went, well, I was almost arrogantly like, I know everything that's in this book already. I don't need the book. Little do I realise that I'd be on this podcast.
Yeah,
It's like, I got rid of that book, and it's a really good book as well. And for the price that they quoted, it's $7.99 for basically a tabletop book. It's a good sized book, all colour and everything. It's really good. It's good for you as well.
Yeah, but it's like 1993, $7.99. That's probably like 25 quid in now money.
True.
You can get it for £2.02 with buy one get one 25% off on eBay though. So won't cost you that much now.
That's actually bargainous.
Yeah, it's like some of these tie-in books are really, really good. I've got a Monty Python one I found in a second-hand shop about 15 years ago, and it's still in decent nick.
You kept the Monty Python one, but you got rid of the Red Dwarf one. What's wrong with you?
I've no idea.
The novels are absolutely brilliant. I've reread them all within the last sort of 6 months or so. So we will definitely do episodes on them in the future.
And it's coming up in this issue. I listen to the audiobooks constantly during my youth. So it's going to be. It's one of my favourite sections in this is the bit coming up about the audiobooks.
Yeah, spoilers.
Next up is the comic book, the Jake Bullitt comic book that is advertised on the front cover, and it's called Jake Bullitt in the Case of the Cashed-In Contestant, Part 1.
Yes, I'm not sure how many because they appear to have cut it up incredibly short.
It's 2 pages per issue.
It is, which seems a little bit too piecemeal for me. It's like I really enjoyed it, but it's definitely leaving you wanting more to an excessive level.
It's almost like they want you to buy the next issue, Colin.
Well, that makes sense, yes, absolutely. But I'd rather they had this story in one and then another really good story. You know, maybe split it into 2, possibly. But
Yeah.
it's when you're just reading 2, so it's 1 double-page spread, basically. And then you're just like, got to wait another month for that now. If it wasn't on the Internet Archive.
It does make me wonder who's got the rights to all these things, because if you gathered together all of the comic strips and put them in a trade paperback, that's a really nice little collection you've got there.
Yeah.
It's funny you should say that. If you remember when I interviewed Chris Carter, he actually attempted to do that. He wanted to do some Red Dwarf comics, some new ones.
Yeah.
And he wanted to start by doing a collected comics and seeing how that did. It's kind of like that was part of his pitch. If the collected comics do well, let me do some more comics. And they couldn't work out who's got the rights.
Man, that's
interesting.
Really frustrating. I'll tell you a good way to find out who's got the rights. Publish them and see if somebody sues you. Then you know.
I mean, that is one way, definitely. It's not the way I would recommend, but it is definitely one way to do it.
I mean, I probably legally here have to point out I am not a lawyer.
No shit with stuff like that.
That's. I mean, they kind of did that with that Bond film back in the day, didn't they? Right, we're going to make our own Bond film that's not tied in with all the others, and we'll just wait to see if they sue us.
Was that the Peter Sellers one?
No, Never Say Never Again.
Oh, was that okay?
That one's not official, although it kind of gets roped in with them all, but it's not an official one.
That's the George Lazenby one, is it?
No, it's Connery. They got Connery
Oh,
back
okay.
for one more.
Oh, right, fair enough. I've not watched them.
They got Connery back even though it wasn't an official one.
Yeah, it was when
Great.
he hated the Broccoli's, and this kind of went. It was something like it was the people who owned Spectre, and
Right.
they'd said like, well, we'll make we don't need your Bond film. We'll go make our own Bond film with blackjack and hookers and
Hold on, isn't that most Bond films anyway?
pretty much. But they went off and they went to Connery like, here's a load of money. Do you really want to stick it to the Bond producers? Like, yeah, I do.
Good grief.
Yeah.
So anyway, Jake Bullitt turns up,
Yeah.
He does.
and it's got Bob Monkhouse in it because it's about a quiz show where the contestant is doing really, really well on 20 million. What's my line? And then gets murdered, and Jake Bullitt needs to find out who done it.
He got transferred from traffic control.
He did.
Yeah. I mean, it starts with a knob gag as well, which shows
Yes.
that we've veered into... they know who their audience is now. It's slightly more adult.
I don't think they ever knew what their audience was. Carl.
No.
But no, this comic's great, and the 2 pages thing. While I absolutely get your point, Colin, I didn't mind it as much as you did. I thought, I think it's the kind of thing that at the time, once I got the complete collection of the magazines that had this comic strip in, I'd have then gone back and read it from scratch. So yes, there is an element of
That's the thing with comics. I have very rarely been a buying a comic each month person. I have nearly always waited till they're collected together in the trade paperback and got it all collected together. In fact, the only time I've ever done that was when all the Before Watchmen ones came out, and I've just recently gone through and reread all of those. But you've got the interspersed throughout Watchmen, you've got the sort of pirate story in there. There's one of those in the back of each of these Before Watchmen, and it's about 2 pages each time, spread out across about 30 or 40 comics in a really weird order. And I can't be asked to read that one. I've read all the other stories in it, but I've just ignored that one because it's so piecemeal and all over the place. So I want it all collected together, damn it.
Yeah, I'm the same. And if there's multiple books, I like to make sure I've picked one where there's like at least 3 out already. Like on one of my Amazon lists, I have got a few where it's like I'm going to wait till there's a couple more volumes out before I start buying that, because I know I'll get hooked into it. Like a few years ago, Transmetropolitan.
Yes,
I got really hooked into that. I bought the first 2, and I think there's 10 volumes in all, and within a month I'd got up to book 6.
Yeah,
I've just been finding them online cheaper, and then it got up to the last 2, and these were reprints, and these last 2 hadn't been reprinted yet, so it was a bit of a like nails on the desk, like, when are they coming out? And I still need to buy those last 2 actually in the reprint.
I've only got the first one of Transmetropolitan. I need to read more of them because they are good. But anyway,
Greg turns up.
No, not in this one.
No. Next up is the Red Dwarf USA interview with a chap called Linwood Boomer, who was the producer. Very ridiculous side notes. I wonder if Linwood Boomer is actually a boomer or he's Gen X.
Pretty sure he's a boomer.
I would imagine he must be Gen X would be too young to have such a high up job at that point.
So Linwood Boomer is an actual boomer.
I would say so.
Boomer.
He gets off remarkably well in this article, I thought, in that he comes across like that he genuinely did enjoy the British series, and he makes a few good points in it as well.
It is a sad story of a fan that was thwarted, isn't it?
Yeah. And it answers quite a few sort of nagging fan questions when they're like, oh, why didn't you just buy the British show? And he points out, well, that's literally the entire series so far wouldn't have even been one American season.
Yeah. Because they have to have 22 episodes so that they can get... I think they need to have basically a full year's worth of episodes to be able to sell it for syndication. So that's why American series are so long.
Well, from the way I understand it is because they call them when they call them seasons, it's because it is 3 months.
Yeah.
Or as good as, say, 3-4 months. But when it hits 100 episodes, it hits syndication. That's where it makes the money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if they say Red Dwarf, whatever it was at the time, they must have been on... I don't think they'd even hit 20 episodes by that point, would they?
No.
Well, it's 5 times 6.
Oh, so they'd have hit about 30. 30. So, yeah, it would have only just made one season and a Christmas special.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is interesting to see, and then there's the whole we brought in writers that people go like, oh, brought in writers when it's established over this issue and the next issue, jumping ahead slightly, that Rob and Doug did the same thing, but in the UK they were in writers' rooms and stuff like that. So with the whole they had like 20 writers, it's like, well, Rob and Doug are used to that.
Yeah,
they've done it themselves. I do think it's quite fun that Craig Bierko, he says, he didn't want it. when we took it to him, he didn't want it at all.
Yeah, so basically the character was changed to get Craig Bierko on board.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know until I read this article, and that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still think he was a good choice, and given a bit of time, he would have settled into it.
You can tell, though, that at the point that they'd done that interview with Mr. Boomer, that it hadn't been cancelled yet, because it goes all the way through with him being fairly positive, even though he's not still attached to the project. And then the last paragraph says, unfortunately, people won't watch Red Dwarf USA because, as was fully explained in our last issue, the project is now being canned.
Oh, yeah, it was pretty savage.
I get the feeling that wasn't written by the writer of this one, whose name's Joe Nazaro.
No.
Which, to me, seems like it was an American fan who got the interview and sent it to the Smegazine.
Yeah.
And they added that bit on the end.
Yeah, it seems like an editor's note, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I thought was quite interesting was he said he didn't think the Britishness of the show was a stumbling block for American audiences, which I think kind of works well for the everyman aspect that we have. It's more about the relationships than the fact it's in space.
Yeah.
And they're not, only one of them's English technically.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite interesting in that it could work for an American audience because it was quite universal. But when they wrote it for the American audience, they made it very American.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was quite odd.
It just seems like it got genericized, if that's a word.
It's not, but it makes sense.
It fucking is now.
Every time I learn something new about the Red Dwarf USA Pilot, it reminds me more and more and more, and I've said this already, about a teleseries called Episodes, which is so good, and it's so well written, and it's really savage about Hollywood and how people's intellectual property is basically violated. And Episodes isn't about Red Dwarf, obviously, but it's about this British couple whose whole life, relationship, and proud television show that they love from Britain is all completely fucked over by going to Hollywood with it.
Yeah.
And it's such a good thing. And if you've not seen Episodes, you should watch it. But we've all known about this Red Dwarf USA Pilot. We did episodes on it, etc., etc. But the vindictiveness and anger that is depicted in this magazine of what it was like when it was contemporary, when it was, we've got this Red Dwarf USA Pilot. It's fascinating to see how that's kind of gently become ironic and funny and, oh, they did a Red Dwarf USA Pilot. You ever seen it? It was a bit bollocks on it. Compared to how people were genuinely vitriolic at the time.
Well, I've sort of seen something very similar recently in that I watched the Masters of the Universe, the anime series that Netflix have done.
Right.
The sequel or the one that's for kids?
The sequel.
I loved that.
I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And then I looked online just to see how, because I do this from time to time, so I wonder how well it got received. They hate it. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's really good.
I agree.
It's the hatred towards it is so petty. It's sexist.
I think there's a slight difference here.
Yeah.
Because, there's a lot of fucking online fandom that is people are irrationally angry about something they used to like as a kid that's been rebooted or changed, or they've had female characters or something like that.
They've dared to actually focus on a woman in a program for children.
Exactly, this kind of thing. And what most of those people don't have any perspective of is the fact that this new thing does not erase your original thing that you loved.
No.
It's still there. You can still watch it at any time. The difference with this is if Red Dwarf USA had been successful, you would have potentially lost Robert Llewellyn as he'd gone over there.
Yeah.
And you could have also potentially lost Rob Grant and Doug Naylor if they'd have gone over there. So I think there is a little bit more justification in the contemporary cynicism about Red Dwarf USA, because they were making something that we could tell from all of the reports wasn't the thing that we loved, and it could potentially have stopped them from making any further series of what a show which was pretty much at its peak at that point. It could have been completely killed in its prime if they'd have all had to go over to America and start doing things differently.
True.
Yeah, I think you're right. But it is fascinating now how the dust has settled and we all see it as a lull.
Yeah.
That you can see why it was a threat at the time. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. But it wasn't destroying people's childhoods.
Oh, fuck off.
Like these fucking bellends that hate all of the Star Wars films that have been made recently because they've got Rey in it. Who I think is fantastic.
Let's move on. We all know where people like us stand on that kind of thing. Next up is Everybody Needs Good Androids, which is an article written by Steve Lyons, who has written lots of very cool Doctor Who books, I realised recently. And it's basically a little article written in the future about the mechanoid evolution. What did you think about this one?
I really enjoyed it because it's basically it's world building,
Yeah.
and he's not adding much to it. It's basically he's collecting all of the little bits of information that we've got from the books and the show, and collating it all together. There is a future article in another issue where it does a similar thing, but I don't think it does it anywhere near as well. But I think this works really, really well.
You see, I don't think it does. It started as a really kind of pure sci-fi, bleak, dystopic thing, but then gently fell into Red Dwarf humour we've already had cracked, and I think it started really well, but I don't know, it could have been so much darker, and I wanted that, and that was the impression I got from the first few paragraphs.
Okay. Yeah, when you've got all the bit about sort of like the equivalencies with slavery in there and things like that, haven't you, which could have gone a lot darker.
One of the main things I took away from it is when they start talking about wax droids, and when they start going on about it, it's like, oh, it's Westworld, isn't it? It's just Westworld.
It was a little bit Westworld.
Meltdown was always a Westworld rip-off. That was the whole premise was, why don't we do a funny Westworld?
Yeah, probably true.
I enjoyed it. I got the feeling that it was something Steve Lyons had written in his own time and brought to it, because they're like, Steve, can you fill 2.5 pages with something? And he went, yeah, I could do that. And he's gone and brought it back, and they've gone, brilliant, Steve, and put it in. Not that it's crap. It is good. But I do feel like it's something that they just gave him a brief of, go write something.
We need to fill a couple of pages, yeah.
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 And don't do an episode guide.
Another episode guide.
I'm sure there'll be another one soon. Series 6 is in the making.
Yeah.
True. Next up is the short Android comics, and I get what it's satirizing, but I didn't find it funny.
I thought it had a couple of jokes in it I enjoyed. Was when he confronts his son with a dirty mag, and it's a Maplin's vacuum cleaner catalogue.
I did like the fact that it was Maplin's, but that was more nostalgia. Be even better if it was a Tandy catalogue.
I mean, yeah. Or radio rentals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really fucking sexual, actually. And this is once again going back to, do they know their audience?
I remember the Androids cartoon from when I was a kid, and I used to read these, and I remember every single one of them having some form of shagging or something overtly sexual in it. Which, again, though, it is parodying the soaps at the time where everybody was, bed hopping and having affairs with other people, and not to this extreme, but it's very like what was happening at the time.
True. Next up is the making of the Red Dwarf talking book.
Yeah, the fact it's called a talking book, I'm sure they said audiobook in the 90s.
It dates it, I think.
I don't think they did yet, because there's a bit... It's essentially a sort of interview with Chris Barry, and like a feature of going along for a day in the life of Chris Barry recording it. And there's a bit in there where Chris Barry says... my neighbour actually listens to these talking books, as if he's surprised, because it's... Yeah, they were called either talking books or books on tape. They were never called audio books yet. That was late 90s.
And it basically does come across like this is a massive novelty and a rarity. And, everything pretty much is on audiobook now.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think that's only a relatively recent thing, maybe the last 10 years, that... it's almost an automatic thing that a big enough book becomes an audiobook as a matter of course.
As soon as they're released as well. Because there's being a dad, there's a podcast I listen to with Josh Widdicombe and Rob Beckett. Rob Beckett and Josh Widdicombe's Parenting Hell, and they've both, during lockdown, written books. And they've been talking about doing the recording of the audiobooks, which are released on the same date as the books are released. So it used to be that the book would be out, and then years later, if the book was successful, they might do a tape version. My nan is like the biggest consumer of audiobooks and books on tape that I know. because she lives in Wales, so whenever we used to drive down, she used to drive halfway to meet us when we were kids, and we'd always have stories to listen to when we were on the way driving through there. We'd have like Bill Bryson books and stuff like that to listen to, Swallows and Amazons and stuff like that. I remember listening to.
I used to have, and I still do have, I've showed you two before I think I should put a picture up on Instagram about it, how many tapes I have of stand-up performances.
Yeah.
Yes.
And some of these have never been re-released for digital. Some have. Laughingstock, who were the only people that would release these kind of things back in the day.
Yeah. Oh, I've just remembered from you saying Laughingstock. The ones that my dad had, we had the Red Dwarf Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, and we had the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio series, and they were all on Laughingstock.
Yeah, I mean, I've got albums by, Jack D, Greg Proops, Sean Hughes, and a lot of these would get released in place of, well, it would have been VHS at the time.
Yeah.
If it's like, I don't want to record a VHS because we can't afford it or whatever, we'll do an album instead. And like I've got a Greg Proops one, which is 2 separate shows from his UK tour, and they're both completely different, and they're really, really good. And I think you said to me, like, I will eventually record them digitally, because I think Laughingstock have started doing them, but they're charging over the hill for them.
Yeah.
But now, like you say, you can put it on Spotify, you can self-release.
Yeah.
There's everything there. But I used to listen to, like, if I ever found a book on tape or a stand-up performance that wasn't in a double tape box, it was a rarity.
Yeah.
Like, I've got so many of those double tape boxes.
We were talking about it on Messenger the other day, weren't we? And where was it you used to buy most of these from, Carl?
Oh, Little Chef.
Brilliant.
Which is, you couldn't imagine, where did you used to buy the audiobooks from? Little Chef, obviously. Because they were for people going on car journeys, so they'd stop off at a Little Chef for their sausage and chips and beans. Yeah. And while they were there, they'd buy a tape for the rest of the journey. Yeah. Yeah,
it's where I used to go on any car journey. If we stopped at a service station, I'd go and have a look, see what books on tape there were.
Yeah.
And I had a Walkman that, this is how swanky I was. I had a Walkman that had the automatic change sides.
Yeah.
Nice.
So if I had a book on tape, I didn't have to stop until both sides of the tape were done. Great bit of kit that was.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There was also, you've got, in this article, you've got Colin from Laughingstock, who I assume is like the agent or producer or something. They don't actually say what his job is. There's a bit where he's reading the bit from the book where Kachansky is learning Japanese and basically does a Japanese version of the pretentious moi joke, which is pretentious watashi. And he completely misunderstood that joke and thought she was trying to say what a shit, which kind of shows he didn't really understand the humour.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there was another bit in there where he was talking about how obviously Chris Barry is the obvious choice to do it, with him being so good at voices, with him being an impressionist. And he's talking about it being quite difficult to keep track of who's talking at a time to do the right voice. And I found that really relatable, because when I'm reading my daughter bedtime stories, I put on some ridiculous fucking voices. And when there's characters having a conversation, I do quite often forget who's talking and give the character the other one's voice. And I just get very confused and lost, and it ends up a complete mess.
I also used to do that in the library when I worked in the library and we did story time. And this is going to be a long episode, but I'm going to tell my little story. One of my favourite books as a kid was The Tiger Skin Rug.
Is that a sequel to The Tiger Who Came to Tea?
No, it's not. It's about this tiger who's a bit of a rubbish tiger, so he gets really, really skinny because he can't catch anything. And then he sees the tiger skin rug in the Maharaja's house and throws out the rug and pretends to be the rug so he can eat their leftovers. And eventually he gets fat and they work it out. But they love him anyway because he stopped these robbers who were trying to break into the Maharaja's house. They get a pet tiger. Everybody's happy. Love, 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 the end. And so, I do like a Brian Blessed impression for the Gruffalo. I do an old lady impression, and there's like, etc., etc. And I started reading through the Tiger Skin Rug, and I forgot that the Maharaja talks. And I was like, I got to the bit where he was talking, and I had a mild panic. You cannot do an Indian accent. That is really offensive. What the fuck are you going to do here, Mark? And so my Maharaja was from Birmingham.
Yeah, I quite often default to a old lady from Birmingham voice half of the time, which is just.
I once had my when I lived with one of my old housemates. His little girl would come over at the weekends, and once he was late coming back from somewhere, and she was like, "Mum, read me a story." No one's here to read me a story, and I was like, "I'll do it." And everyone looked at me like, "You sure about this?" I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. Thinking I haven't done it in years, but I'll give it a go. And I sat with her reading the book, and I started doing the voices, and I got quite into it. And it was at this point, she was only about 4 or 5. She literally turned around and looked at me like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, your dad doesn't do the voices, does he?
How can you not? That's just weird to not do the voices.
Yeah.
That's the best bit, is doing the stupid voices. But talking about the article, going back to it, seeing as we both all tangented and told silly stories, the recording process fascinated me. They actually used tapes, and they used a script. So, and they had problems with the script rustling while he was reading. I mean, this is medieval times as far as I'm concerned.
It is 1992, so DAT tapes would have just about been available, but they wouldn't have been everywhere yet. Yeah, every bit of recording I did up until about 1997 would have been on tape. So whether that was, if I ever went into a studio, it was reel-to-reel tape, or if I did recording at home, it was on a Porta Studio onto a normal cassette tape. In about 97, 98, my dad got a mini-disc Porta Studio, so that was our first bit of digital recording. And then I went to college to do a music course in 99, and the standard at that time was still tape, but it was DAT tapes, which was basically, it was like a VHS tape. It was SVHS is the same as a DAT tape. So it was still tape even at that point, but you could do a little bit more with editing. But editing like we do in Audacity and Reaper and people do in Pro Tools now didn't really come into place until this century.
Yeah.
It's bands like Linkin Park that I think of as being the earliest sort of Pro Tools band where you can tell that that's what the editing is being done on. And there'd be no need before that really for editing for something as simple as just one person speaking. They wouldn't need that kind of technology. So even a decade later, that would potentially have still been done on at least on DAT tape.
There's a bit in it where they mention he botches something, and the engineer said, "You're going to have to go from an earlier bit because I've recorded over it."
Yeah.
The pressure I'd have felt if I was Chris Barry doing that is like, right, we've only because tape degrades.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like you can't botch up that much because you've probably only got a limited amount of tape.
If you do too many overdubs, it makes the tape go really, really thin. Sly and the Family Stone, there's a riot going on. Allegedly, the tape that was recorded on was nearly see-through because they did so many overdubs and retakes when they were recording it. So it was really fragile. But it sounds good, so that's fine.
Next up is Holograms, and I literally found nothing interesting whatsoever in this.
Me either, to be honest.
There was one bit I thought that I quite liked. I liked that there was somebody, again, asking for technical diagrams of Starbug and Red Dwarf, which, as I'd mentioned in a previous episode, the Thunderbirds comic from slightly earlier than this had that for all of the Thunderbirds vehicles. So I would have absolutely loved that, particularly at the time.
That would have been cool. Next up is news from the Dwarf, and the highlights were that 6 is being written, Red Dwarf 1 is being released on tape, I Love It is launching, and Dimension Jump 2 is happening.
And Paul Jackson is becoming the director of programming at Carlton TV, which is quite a promotion.
The biggest thing I took away from this was, one, Craig Charles did a breakfast show on the radio, which I thought was hilarious, considering how hard Craig Charles was probably partying during the 90s. And the other one was the time frame that Red Dwarf 5 was done. Was it filmed in November and early December 91 and on air in February, March 92?
Yeah.
It's like, bloody hell. That is a turnaround.
Yeah, that's definitely fast.
Yeah. Considering it was the most troubled production as well.
Yeah. Next up is an advert for the talking book on cassette, and it includes 6 theme variations. Don't forget that. And it's £25.99 or £19.99 for Smegazine readers. And that seems like an incredibly large amount of money for an audiobook. You wouldn't pay anything resembling that for an audiobook now.
Not with inflation, no, definitely.
Well, with inflation, we're probably looking at 70 quid, aren't we?
Quite possibly.
Isn't it about 3 times the amount? I can't remember. We did that one at least, didn't we?
But yeah. I remember, because I didn't know the difference between abridged and unabridged as a kid. So the ones I had were just the 2 cassettes. So it was like 3 hours. It was only when I bought the physical book and read it, it was like, oh, there's a lot more stuff in here. I have a very big fondness for the abridged versions.
I can't think of anything I would like less. I hate abridged stuff. I always have done. Even as a kid, I hated it. I knew what it was because when I discovered what it was, and I thought I got a bargain for a cheaper version, and I hadn't, I was mortified. The other adverts later on in the issue are for Red Dwarf T-Shirts, an Anne McCaffrey book, and the Amiga home computer.
Yes, the same one that they had in either it was in yesterday's, the one we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah, and again, these little cultural references, like they record on tape and the Amiga is your contemporary computer, really do put you back into the, oh shit, yeah, it was 93, wasn't it?
92.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Nearly 93.
Monkey Island 2 on 12 discs.
The next issue ad is just the cover. There's nothing about what's going to be in it. It's just the cover, and it's got a naked Rimmer with the ladies who played with his nipples and the Inquisitor on it.
That's all you need, though, isn't it?
I mean, I don't know whether you're into nipple play or not, but, you know. Oh, that wasn't what you were talking about. Sorry, love.
Yeah, I'm into the Inquisitor mask.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Moving on, it's a comic strip, and it's called In Living Memory, and it's about the cat people.
It's the continue. It doesn't say part 2 or anything, but it's the continuation from the previous episode.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I'd forgotten that this was a part 2. I was like, oh, this one's starting in the middle of something. It's like, oh no, it happened in the last one, which shows how memorable part 1 was for me.
Well, it doesn't make it obvious. It doesn't say it's part 2, does it?
No, it explains the entire plot in 2 panels.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And there's some lovely stuff in this. I particularly liked the double Polaroid reference. That was a nice touch.
Well, yeah, because basically they found a machine that's capable of creating things from pure memory. So, of course, Rimmer creates himself a body, although he has made himself from his own thoughts. So he's made himself braver, taller, and with a bigger knob.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we'd all probably do that, wouldn't we?
I wouldn't need to. But then they're fighting against this 6-eyed carnivorous raging swamp beast. And one of the problems that Rimmer has is he's made himself braver than he originally was. So he goes and fights it and sacrifices himself to save all the rest of them.
He's Ace. He's Ace without the hair.
Yeah,
I was going to say, does this count as an ace? Because it feels a bit like it does.
he's ace in character, isn't he? But without the look.
Yeah. I like the fact that, I mean, obviously he's a human being again, but the way he's drawn, he's in colour for a start, because in a lot of these comics he's in black and white.
It's because he's alive.
Yeah, exactly. But they've actually drawn him, he does look more rugged. He looks Dan Dare-like.
Yes, definitely Dan Dare.
Yeah, whereas you see, it's one of my favourite bits in this strip is when Holly tells Lister that he's gone, and Lister asks how he can't touch anything, and he's taken the scutters to drive Starbug. And just Holly's reaction of bloody hell, there goes another one, which is quite good because I don't think they've established in the continuity yet that there's more than one Starbug. And it's always fun to see Blue Midget come back as well.
Amount of times Starbug has crashed.
Yeah.
They'd have to have a lot of them.
True.
Yeah.
Or they have to like make new ones from like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite nice as well how going into that sort of Rimmer will defeat himself, even if it's in a very heroic way.
Yes.
Yeah,
Self-sabotage is absolutely his thing.
Yeah.
Indeed. Next up is part 2 of the survey results. And it's fascinating that, again, the contemporary situation you were in, people hadn't seen Series 1 other than if it had been on the first broadcast. So they say that it didn't really get a fair crack of the whip because it hasn't been seen very much.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. But the thing that I took away from it is Series 5 takes an absolute kicking. And I can't fathom it.
I was surprised Meltdown did as badly as it did.
The magazine are always giving Meltdown a kicking. I think as they've said things like there was a quiz a few issues ago where it was like settle down to watch one of your favourite episodes of Red Dwarf or even Meltdown. By putting that in people's heads and then going, so all of the people that will have taken part in the survey obviously are readers of this magazine, so they'd all had that suggested to them in multiple issues. So even if they didn't remember it that well, they would have had it suggested to them that it's not as good an episode. But what the fuck? How the fucking hell did Body Swap get in the top 10?
I don't get it. I do think it would be a very different list now.
I couldn't believe Hollow Ship was second to last.
Yeah, I really liked Hollow Ship.
I don't like it as much as you two, but Hollow Ship's a good episode, and I don't think it deserves to be down there.
No, it definitely should be above the majority of the stuff from season 1. To say they hadn't seen season 1, 2 much since broadcast, and Hollow Ship is below something like Waiting for God.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
And in the grand scheme of things, the end isn't a great episode.
Oh,
no, it's an important episode, but you're right, it's not as rewatchable as some of the others.
It's got the Everybody's Dead Dave gag in it. That's like the best Red Dwarf gag ever.
I don't think I'd say it's one of the best ones.
Dog's milk.
Yes.
And the winner by an absolute country mile was Back to Reality. I agree with that. At this stage, at least, Back to Reality was the best episode. That's true.
Because Gunman hadn't come out yet.
I mean, we all know my favourite episode is Gunman.
Yeah.
The only other thing I wanted to highlight was there was a little bit less perviness than we've been expecting from readers' letters, but there is still a reference to Hattie Hayridge's legs.
Yes.
Yes. There's not a great deal you can say about it.
No, but the perviness does always take me off guard because you would not publish anything like that modern magazine, you know?
Yeah, it's very, very, or if you did, it would be ridiculed to fuck.
Yeah, oh yeah, you'd be called a lot of names for that kind of shit.
And rightfully so.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up is the interview, and it's with Howard Goodall, the music composer of Red Dwarf. And my immediate response was, you get 100 interviews with the stars of shows, but it's interviews like this that I really, really find interesting.
Yeah.
it was really interesting to read. This was especially sort of the how he got into it, which was basically Rowan Atkinson was on Not the 9 O'Clock News and went, my mate does music.
Yeah, and he's worked with Rowan Atkinson on most of the things that pretty much every time Rowan Atkinson has done something where he's had the power to need to have a say in what the music needs to be. He's got Howard Goodall in because he's done Blackadder, Mr. Bean. And, he says at some point in the interview that he really wants to get into doing films. He did later on, but the films were Johnny English and Mr. Bean's Holiday.
Oh dear. There's a lot on Blackadder though.
Yes, he's great at what he does. I hadn't clicked that he did the QI theme tune. Which
did he?
Great bit of music. Have either of you ever seen a more recent sitcom called Phone Shop?
No, but I've heard of it.
Phone Shop is fucking hilarious, but one of my favourite bits is like the manager of the phone shop is trying to be sort of down with the kids, and he's got a big spliff with him, and he's like, I'm going to put some reggae on, and he puts the QI theme tune on, which I find just ridiculously funny because it's so silly.
Brilliant.
But yeah, Howard Goodall, he's done QI, Mr. Bean, Blackadder, Not the 9 O'Clock News, Bernard the Genie, which I'd forgotten existed. That would be one for writing the childhood.
Wow.
Yeah, he mentions in the interview about the fact that they say something about, have you always wanted to do this kind of music, or did you perhaps want to be a pop star or something? And he says, well, actually, I was in a band before I got into this. It wasn't a very good band. We made an album and a couple of singles, which were really crap, but he doesn't say the name of the band. So I did some research, and he was in a band called Half Brother, who released an album in 1978. You can pick up the album really, really, really cheaply. I don't know if you'd want to. You can listen to some of the songs on YouTube. What I would say is this came out in 1978, but in a parallel universe where punk had never happened. Because it is the most uncool 70s fucking... It's not good.
I'll put one of the YouTube vids on the socials when this episode goes out.
You played us a bit before we started today, and when it was playing, because it had the very long like Moog keyboard intro.
Yes,
and all I could think was, "Ladies and gentlemen, Pan's people." You know, it just sort of
absolutely
a lot of dry ice and dancing. You could imagine to it. It's sort of very Mark Bolan T-Rexy, but with no guitars.
It was nowhere near as cool.
Yeah,
it was fucking sub Nolan Sisters. The music was, absolutely not punk in any fucking way.
Yeah,
but yeah, he's also he mentions in there that they're talking about the actual Red Dwarf theme song at the end of the episode. It's cold outside, you know. And he's talking about Jenna Russell, who is the lady that sung it. And that was somebody he'd worked with in musicals. And I think we may have mentioned previously, she's most well known for, she was Michelle Fowler in EastEnders on Michelle Fowler's second regeneration. So she's not Suzanne Tully.
Is that her? Oh, my.
Yes.
Good grief.
I don't know that because it was years after I'd moved out of living with my mum, so never had to watch EastEnders anymore. But when Michelle Fowler obviously got mortally wounded in some way and had to regenerate, I think that's how these things work.
Right.
She was the new body that she regenerated into.
Good grief.
He's also got a bit where he's talking about the equipment that he uses. And being a music nerd...
I was going to ask you about this, actually. Yeah.
So he's talking about he's got all the Proteus equipment, which that he's talking about it's an Emu Proteus. It's basically a synth module that's a rack-mounted synth module. So it's basically it's like a box of sounds. So it's got lots of different synth voices. So you'd then program that into a sequencer to play different sort of orchestral sounds or whatever you needed. But then he says, and I've got a Roland and I've got a Yamaha. What fucking Roland? What fucking These are companies that have hundreds, if not thousands, of different products.
Well, you'll never know.
Yeah, that is the equivalent of saying, what music have you got? Oh, we've got both, country and western.
It is. It's exactly like that. But then it wasn't a music magazine. If he was doing an interview with like Sound on Sound or something like that, he might have gone a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, I thought it was a great interview. Like I say, it's
was.
these kind of interviews that I prefer over the stars, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because you're not going to get them anywhere else.
Yeah, it made me a little bit sad that when he played the Hammond organ version of the theme tune, it wasn't on a Hammond organ.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be, though.
Next up is another comic, and it's Red Dwarf USA. It's a pretty savage piss take that's crude, but essentially it's the premise of the episodes, isn't it? I quite enjoyed it because the Red Dwarf USA's pilot deserves a kicking.
I thought it was okay, but it was essentially just a list of American sitcom cliches.
Yes.
Pictures.
I liked it. It felt a bit mean after doing the interview with Linwood Boomer and it being like quite complimentary towards him, and then they put that snarky bit in at the end, and then did this.
I think it was quite deliberate that they put this in on this month at the same time as they interviewed Linwood Boomer.
Yeah. Baby Crichton had big Baby Yoda energy.
Yes.
You could sell that.
You definitely could.
Talking about things being sold, the final article.
Yes, the final article is Under the Hammer, which is an article on the Red Dwarf BBC auction. And I just was flabbergasted. What sold for like fuck all money?
Yeah.
These people probably still own these items and they're worth 10, 20, 30 times the amount they bought them for now. And I know the stuff, it said that a lot of the stuff was in bad nick, which wouldn't happen now because there's so much money in selling on memorabilia and stuff. But yeah, this article was absolutely fascinating. I really enjoyed it.
The original Crichton costume went for 300 quid, which is bog all.
And it's got a picture of the lady wearing it who bought it in there.
Yeah.
And it seems to fit quite well, which is, if you're buying clothes, it's quite nice that they're the right sizes. So it's a bit coincidental that, you've also got, there's a picture of a guy wearing the Cat Priest costume, and that appears to fit. And he's holding up the top half of Cat's mermaid. So it's the fish head.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we got a list in there of what was sold and how much the expected price was and what they actually sold for. Nearly everything sold for more or round about what they expected. Did you guys go through and is there anything in there that you would have bought for definite? What would you have chosen?
I'd have probably gone for the Cat Priest's.
I can see you wearing that actually, yeah.
Either I'd have worn it myself or given it to Mark when he does his humanists.
I'm not wearing the fucking Cat Priest outfit for a ceremony, unless it's a Red Dwarf themed ceremony. I am available for Red Dwarf themed ceremonies if people would like that. If you would like to be married by Crichton, I can do that, but you have to buy me the Crichton outfit. I would absolutely do a Red Dwarf themed wedding. Why the fuck wouldn't I do that? That would be awesome. So yeah, in fact, I'll do it on discount. If anyone is listening to this, I'll give you a 20% discount on your wedding fee if you want a Red Dwarf wedding, because I just want to. But you would have to buy me the costume. So it's 20% discount off my fee. You still have to buy me the fucking costume.
And we'd have to get an episode out of it.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
I'd have liked one of the baby scutters. I think that would have been a very cool thing to have.
I was going to say the baby scutter is what I'd have gone for.
I thought you'd have gone for the for Cat's gold spacesuit, Mark.
No, it's too clunky, and I've got a small flat, so I'd have definitely gone for a baby scutter.
Imagine you walking down the road at Pride in a bright gold lame spacesuit, Mark.
Maybe I should get the fucking gold spacesuit. I wonder if you own the gold spacesuit and you bought it for like 300 quid or something. Let us know, and we'll be jealous.
So I reckon I'd go for Crichton's spare head, which I think was what sold for. That sold for the most money. That was £440. That'd be amazing just to have on your shelf, wouldn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
But other than that, if I had to go for an item of clothing, Lister's khaki jacket, I reckon.
Yeah.
I could rock that.
You definitely could. It would suit you. Although I think you're probably a bit broader than Craig Charles, maybe?
Yes, I am a fat bastard.
I was talking about your shoulders, not your belly.
No, I've got quite a small frame, just a massive stomach.
Okay. Right, moving on. I didn't even mean to insult you, shit.
I like the fact on here as well. It's like all this Red Dwarf stuff. We go, we're selling stuff from Blake 7. It's like, well, egg boxes? Like,
wow, the shade. The shade. And then finally is the mostly bland Crichton profile. I've got nothing to say about that.
But to be honest, it's basically repeating jokes from episodes with a bit of backstory to join the dots. And
it's mostly filler.
It's fine, but it's definitely filler. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So, Colin, first, what was your favourite thing in this issue?
I think probably the Howard Goodall interview. Mainly for me being a music nerd, and I like learning about music-y stuff. Cool. And Carl?
I think again, it's it's a toss-up between the Howard Goodall interview and the Talking Book, just because of the nostalgia it brought back to me from listening to that book back in the day. But I think for terms of like content, I think the Howard Goodall interview definitely edges it out.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I really, really liked the Jake Bullitt comic strip, but it was also the interview for me. But I think the fact that we all struggled with it was the interview shows the quality has increased.
It has, and if the Jake Bullitt strip had been more substantial, if it had been in a longer portion, that probably would have taken it for me, because the artwork in it is absolutely fantastic, and I like the story, and it's funny. It's just I wanted more of it.
Spoilers, you get that next week, month, day, whatever the fuck we're
tomorrow.
Doing. That. What was your least favourite, Colin?
I think my least favourite was probably the fact that fucking Body Swap was in the top 10 in the survey results. That tainted the whole thing. Fuck it, have you seen Body Swap? It's shit.
Yeah. And Carl?
It'd be the survey results for me as well. It was fair enough, show the survey results of what's come in, but 3 pages. It didn't need it. It really didn't.
See, I really didn't find the Androids comic funny, but I think the sheer and utter waste of print that was the holograms this issue. There was nothing of even remote interest for me on holograms, so holograms.
You almost can't blame the Smegazine for that, though, because the readers should have fucking written better things in.
True that. Right, well, we've done a massive episode on the Smegazine, so I'm not gonna plug anything. Carl, what's your favourite chocolate bar?
Oh, I do love a Galaxy.
All right, Colin, what's your favourite chocolate bar?
Oh, have you seen them fucking Tony's Chocolonely ones, the massive ones that are really chunky? There's a salted caramel one of them that is amazing, but it's about $5. But it's worth it.
I think for me, I could go for something like that and go, the indulgent chocolate bar of blah, blah, blah. Nah, mate, it's a double-decker. I just love a double-decker.
Awesome.
My favourite. It's my favourite since I was a kid as well. Can we all agree that hotel chocolate's crap?
No.
Really? I think it's crap. Oh, nah, crap.
I've not had any in a very long time.
I like hotel chocolate. I have some for Christmas every year.
Nah, it's crap. I'd rather have a dairy milk.
Yeah, I do have to laugh that we're not plugging anything today. And one of the reviews I read for the podcast, I don't know how old it was, but are they on any other podcasts? Like, have you heard Mark at any point during any episode? Yeah.
Where are these reviews? I've read none of them.
Where was it? I think there's a couple on Apple. And I looked on my podcast app, and it has a section where I can bring up reviews, and it does it from various places.
Right, collate all these, and I want to read them, and then we'll do a mini episode where we go, thank you for your feedback, we agree, or thank you for your feedback, all right, that made a very good point, fuck off. We'll do that. Let's do that.
We're woke lefty bellends.
We are woke lefty bellends and fucking
That's
proud of
Mr.
it.
Woke Lefty Bellend. Thank you very much.
In it. Right, thank you for listening. We are back tomorrow with, funnily enough, Smegazine issue 11. So until next time.
Please, Mr. Lefty Bellend is my father.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This Podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.